Okay, so today we are going to talk about aligning your assessments to the STAAR test. And we're going to talk about different parts of it, and from tech enhanced items to accommodations to general student navigation. But just to start out, let's look at who Edcite is, who I am, and why we're talking about this. So quick introduction into who Edcite is. We are an assessments and analytics platform. So everything we build is really based in this understanding that feedback drives growth. And the more you know, the better you can do. And so we really tackle that with aligned assessments and actionable data. And one of the big components of how we tackle aligned assessments is alignment to those end of year state tests, because we know that they have really big impacts on our schools, on our communities, and we need to make sure that they're accurately representing what our students learned that school year. So we want to make sure students are familiar with how to navigate those online assessments, so they can show all of that great learning that happened. So aligned assessments are the focus of today, and that's our Edcite assessment platform. Edcite also has a data hub platform. We offer professional development, integrations, and content work. So feel free to follow up with us at a different time if you're interested in any of those other topics. But today we really want to focus on alignment to the STAAR test. So I'm going to share some resources at the end that go through all of these different pieces. But when we talk about alignment to the STAAR test, and there's no better place than to start with the TEA resources themselves. So TEA, as I'm sure many of you know and have looked at already, they release blueprints, sample items, and TEKS supporting documents. So these are just a couple screenshots from some of those documents. You can see here on the top right picture that you've got a blueprint that shows how many questions you can expect on, and this was for the 22-23 school year, so we'll be looking to see when additional information is added. But you can see how many questions for each of those standards you can expect to see, or those reporting categories. And so using that blueprint with the curriculum resources, with those TEKS, where they're mentioning which one is considered a readiness standard versus a supporting standard. Because as you notice in their descriptions, they said that those readiness standards are going to make the bulk of the assessment questions. And then those supporting standards, you still need to make sure you're covering them, giving students experience with them, but just understanding the ratio of how those will show up is helpful when aligning your year-long assessments to what that STAAR test looks like. So that's really the content side of things. What are the questions actually measuring? The other side of it is, how are they measuring it? And this gets really into those tech enhanced items and tools. So TEA has the practice portal where you can go in, you can actually practice the different materials. And I'm sure many of your teams have gone in and done that. The big thing we want to talk about today is, okay, let's say you want more than just what you can find on the TEA practice site, or you want to be able to use the curriculum that you've been using in your classroom for years, and you just want to put that look and feel of the STAAR test on what is tried and tested in your classroom. And so this idea is really, how do you take these materials that have been shared out about the STAAR test and how the states are looking at student learning, how do you take that and apply it to your formative and summative assessments year round? So that's where Edcite really wants to make sure you've got an actionable tool. So on Edcite, you can create a free teacher account if you have not done so already, and you can find and build the item types that are already on, they're on Edcite, and they are also on the STAAR assessment. And so I'm actually going to pause here and toggle over to a page I'll be sharing with all of you after this session, which is our STAAR practice web page. It's got all of these resources that I'm mentioning. It includes the curriculum document that you saw the screenshot of, along with the blueprints. And down here, it's got all of the item types that's the STAAR test has indicated they will have. So this is straight from the information TEA has put out. For multi-select question types, you could expect that to appear on the reading language arts, math, science, and social studies. And this chart also has links on how to build that question on Edcite. So if you click on this, it's going to be a how-to guide. And here's a sample. So all of these are listed here, but to just give us a quick view of what these look like for students, let's open up and actually I'm gonna log in. And Harry Potter fans, you will appreciate my user for this demo is Helga Hufflepuff. And so here's just a quick view of what some of these questions look like. You know, multiple choice, very basic, what many of you are used to seeing. You've also got those part A, part B questions where students have to scroll on the left and then answer questions on the right. Sometimes they have a paired passage that they have to toggle between. You've got those drag and drop question types where, you know, students are dragging and dropping the answers into the box. You've got the touch image question types where students are selecting, you know, different parts. That's often called a hotspot question. You've got graphing question types. I'm going to go through these ones pretty quickly. Keypad question types. Let's see. Some of these are called hot text. So it's a selection of text, and you can decide, yes, I want to use this question type, and I want students to select words, sentences, paragraphs, or custom selections. So custom selections work really well if you're pulling quotations and it's going to cover multiple sentences. You know, you've got drop-down question types. So all of these items that you see listed on TEA, the best way to really learn how to build them on Edcite is going to be using these how-to guides. So if I, let's say, wanted to learn how to make a fill-in-the-blank question type, I could come over here. It's going to give me step-by-step instructions on how do I actually set this up, how do I build it, and then you can use that to then send to students. If, let's say, you don't want to build from scratch, good news, you don't have to. You can also use Edcite to, let's go just to edcite.com. You can always go into the question bank and search for a particular question. So if I wanted to really focus in on those fill in the blank question types, I can search for that particular item type and, you know, check out a specific standard if I want to, or browse by a particular topic. So you've got those options. I'll do that again here. We'll say fill in the blanks. And let's say instead of pre-K through second, let's open it up to all. You know, I can see that there's more than 19,000 fill in the blank question types. And fill in the blank can be a drag and drop, a drop down, or a type in text answer. So this is a resource that I want to make sure everyone knows is available. And just to really talk about how you build those into your assessments, it really comes into what standards are you assessing. If I want to assess my graphing or my data analysis, then I'm going to use some of those bar chart question types. If I'm doing a theme-based question and I've got some reading, then I'm going to use the hotspot or the hot text question where they're selecting maybe words to support their answer. So definitely the question types are some of the real meat of making sure that your assessment is going to have an aligned look and feel and experience for that end of year test. The other piece to make sure students know how to use and they're familiar with are the accommodations. So this is going to run through some of the accommodations that I always say are important to review with students before that end of year state test. And there's no better way to review it than to build it in to just your regular formative and summative assessment processes. You know, for me, when I was in the classroom, I never liked this idea of test prep and this idea that we need to separately prepare students for an assessment. I much prefer this idea that I'm embedding all of these skills into my year-round materials. So when it comes to the end of the year, my students are prepared, and they never had to have a separate set of hours just practicing the technology. They were practicing rigorous content and great readings and good materials, and at the same time learning how to use the technology. So with text to speech, I always say this is an important one to give students practice with. Text to speech, if I were to invent a text to speech that I feel is most intuitive, I would probably go with a play button, but that is not what text to speech looks like on the end of year STAAR test, and we want to make sure students know how to access it. So it's important students know to use that drop-down menu to speak the text. And so if students don't know, hey, I need to click on that drop-down menu to get my text to speech, then at the end of the year, are they really having their accommodation fully met and fully provided if they don't know how to access it? So text to speech is a good one to review with your students. The highlighter tool, very similar in that you select and then you highlight a portion of the text, and then you can use the highlight selection button to highlight the text. The masking tool, it's going to give you a draggable space, so you can drag to create what you want to be masked on the assessment. And that's something you might want to explicitly go through with your students. The dictionary tool, this is a good one to make sure students know how to use. So making sure they know where that is up in their top navigation, and giving them practice with, if I don't know this word, popping up to the dictionary, pulling it up, and helping that inform my responses. Content clarifiers, this is a new one that Edcite added last school year based on what we were seeing from TEA and on the STAAR assessment. So students can go to those dots under a word to get whatever clarifier has been added to that piece of text. I've also seen some teams make a content clarifier an image. So you've got a full control over what you want your content clarifiers to be. It's a rich text editor that you can add any explanation to parts of your text. The line reader, this is a nice one just to help make sure students are able to follow along and they're staying in the correct line when they're reading. So making sure students know how to access that, how to click to then bring the line reader to a different line if they need to. So just familiarity with that. Now, this is where we start to shift into more of the interface and the student experience. We talked a lot about specific tools, but it's important to also make sure students know how to navigate the general assessment. So if I want to come back to something, I can mark that question for review, and then on my review page at the end, I can see which questions I have flagged. So this is just, getting students used to, I've got my, arrows to navigate from one question to the next. If I want to go back to review a question, I've always got that drop down to mark it for review, and then on my review, click in to see it again. The Zoom tool, making sure if students need to be able to increase the size of what's on the screen, that they know how to do that in the top nav bar. And then the notepad is another piece. I do see sometimes teachers want to have students using the notepads from the nav bar. You can also look at adding in a drawing question. I've seen some people put graph paper as the background of their drawing question. So students are using that as a scratch pad and then entering the answer in another portion of the question. So there's a few options here, but just making sure students know I can go to that top nav bar and add in whatever notes I need to. And so this really highlights intentionally that interface experience. So you can see here on question 3, that one was marked for review, and you can see it's got that little flag, and you can see the check marks for questions that have been answered. So making sure students know, oh, before I submit, I want to go back to question 3 and complete that one. So we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to make sure I leave some time for questions, and I want to share something really tangible that you can take back to your teams. So the first one I'll start with is actually over here on the right, which is that STAAR resource page. And this is the one we were looking at earlier, where it just goes through all of the materials about the STAAR test, all of the item types, the test interface, and it also has a section all about the accommodations and tools like we talked about. Just as a follow-up note about accommodations and tools, you can, on our school and district version, turn on specific tools for specific groups of students, and those can be turned on in a subject-specific way. So if you have a student that gets content clarifiers for their ELA assessments, you can have that turned on so they will be the only ones that have access to those content clarifiers. The same for text-to-speech. Maybe you have a subset of students that get text-to-speech for math, science, and not for ELA. You can turn it on just for a particular subject, and it's only going to be on for that group of students. So it's a nice way to make sure that students are getting what they need without you as a teacher or an administrator having to make multiple copies of the same test and turning on different tools for different tests. You just, when you upload your students, you indicate what groups they should be in for accommodations, and then the same test goes out to everybody, but the system knows what tools to turn on for whom. Okay, the other really great resource I want to share is the Common Assessments Initiative. So this is going to give you access to released STAAR tests in our premium STAAR style look and feel. So you'll notice here, this is a release test, and it's got that look and feel where it's got, the passage on the left, it's got the questions on the right, you've got your navigation up here that just looks a lot like that end of year state test. So you can come in here and you can say, yep, I want to use this, copy the assignment, and push that out to your students. And it's going to have all of the accommodations and everything turned on and available. So those would be the two really tangible takeaways that I'd encourage you to bring back to your teams, that STAAR resource page and the Texas Common Assessments Initiative. And before I take questions, I just want to highlight, if you are looking to roll this out at a school or district level, you're going to be looking more at our Edcite Schools platform as opposed to the free teacher platform. And the Edcite Schools platform is going to have all of the tools for managing a district or school-wide implementation. So you can have the entire district synced from ClassLink or Clever. You can set up those accommodation groups like we talked about. You can add co-teachers. You can share data with administrators and build content for an entire team to deliver. So that is, and I think a couple questions. I can get to those questions there at the end. So that's really, the difference between the free teacher version and the school and district version really comes down to some additional reports that you get, additional look and feel to mirror that end of year STAAR test. And then it's just really intentionally built for a team to implement. Our other school and district platform is the Data Hub. And so Data Hub is a data warehouse system. So if you want to take those STAAR test results, pop them into the system and have dashboards that are easy to share out with your team. You want to bring in your Edcite assessments, you want to bring in your NWEA or other data points into one centralized system. That's where Data Hub can be really helpful. So and this kind of just talks about Data Hub as another platform that you can look at. It's got a lot of customization around data collection. So especially if you're doing any early literacy or science of reading data collection, there's a really nice way to pull that in. Okay. Now I want to switch over to questions and just let you know that if you have any technical questions, you can reach out to support@edcite.com. And if you are interested in Edcite Schools or Data Hub, you can send an email to schools@edcite.com and we can follow up with you there.